through the love winds. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. Welcome back to another episode of the Reconnect with Your Teenager podcast with yours truly, Emma G. If you are new to this space, this time zone, this world of the reconnecting with your teenager, let me break it down for you really quickly. My name is Emma G, and I have been a youth empowerment through songwriting coach for the past 4 or 5 years, as well as a musician and speaker. My whole mission is to utilize non-conventional ways like music to help empower and build and develop a next generation of strong, resilient, happy, positive teenagers and adults. But of course, I'm not the only one who's doing this kind of work. Yes, my method of madness is through music, but there are artists and creators and coaches and mentors and teachers and educators all around the world who are utilizing other methodologies to help make sure that this next generation of young people grow into happy, healthy adults. Today, I am joined all the way from Missouri, none other than Mel Studer. How are you, Mel?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. The sun is shining here in DC. It's clearly springtime, and where I get to hide from the sunshine for a little bit and come and hang out with you. So I'm happy.
Yeah, and the sun is trying really hard to shine here. It's very cloudy though.
And listen, as long as the sun is still trying, that's all we can ask for, right?
Yeah.
So let's dive right in. You have quite an interesting story because, like I said, your approach to young people and working with young people is maybe not the most traditional pathway, because you have been an educator yourself for the past 30 years, specifically with middle school. Is that correct?
Not only.
Okay.
I actually have a varied. So I had 2 years in middle school. That were my last 2 years of teaching, but I've
Gotcha.
taught preschool and pre-K for 11 years. I taught elementary for 9 and then middle school for 2. So it's kind of been, and then I subbed in between all of there when I had little boys at home with me.
Right.
So
that's quite the journey. So what got you into education in the first place?
I've thought a lot about that. I just love kids. And of course, if you would have told me in college that I would have chosen preschool over all of those ages that I mentioned, I would have said, no, that's not right. But those are my people in the classroom. But finishing out in middle school a couple years ago made me realize how, as a parent, you struggle to keep that connection with your teenager when they become a teen. And I just watched a lot of things happening in and outside of my classroom when I taught middle school. And I thought the parents and the kids need so much help with just relationships and how to deal with everything that is going on in the world right now.
Of course.
I had already been writing on my blog, Next Phase Parenting, which it's all in the description. I'm now I had been at Parenting High Schools and now I'm at Next Phase Parenting. It's confusing. But really, my whole premise is that as parents, it's our job to create and keep that connection with our teens. And there's a million ways to do it, and every family is different. Every teen is different, even within your own home.
Of course.
My first son and my second and my third are all completely different. So, it gave me a lot more perspective when I went back into the classroom in middle school, for sure.
Right. I have a couple of questions, but I want to dive right into the jugular, if I may.
Sure.
Because I was raised in a different country to the States. I grew up in New Zealand, between New Zealand and Fiji, and it's one of those things now that I've been in the education space in the Washington, D.C. area since my TED Talk went live. I've been doing some subbing and some, empowerment sessions with various middle schools and high schools as well. I've noticed a distinct difference in the mindset of an educator here compared to in New Zealand. Yet I feel as if the experiences of young people tend to be quite same. With the advent of social media and technology and things, however, things are changing so dramatically and so quickly. I'm curious, as you have gone from parenting middle schoolers to educating middle schoolers to working and coaching middle schoolers, what have been the things that have kind of most caught you off guard, or that you may have not been quite as prepared for as you would have liked?
So that's a great question. I think what for me as a parent, when our oldest turned 14, up until that point, we had felt like, oh, we got this. He's a good kid. He's doing okay in school. And I think we just kind of sat back on our laurels and thought, he's got this. And then literally when he turned 14, within hours, it seemed like he was this completely different creature. And we're
Right,
like,
right.
no, I don't know who that is anymore. And we had always been, I would call ourselves purposeful parenters. We always had, we had family meetings, once a month, just to kind of check in with everybody. But we had also met one-on-one with each of our guys, right around, like, they're called IPRs in our town, interim progress reports, which are basically grades. So they would meet with us one-on-one, and not just about grades, but kind of like, where were they at in life, and what was going on that we needed to know about, or did they have any questions for us? But when our oldest got to middle school, we kind of dropped the ball. We thought he had, that it was fine. He's growing up. He doesn't need us anymore. And that was the hugest mistake. I think if I could look back on all my parenting, and of course we aren't perfect and we made lots of mistakes, but that was our biggest mistake. And it was during that time of reassessment and really thinking about it and really not being satisfied with that event that I started thinking about writing a blog. And that's where I wrote a book, and that's where that came from, was just the research. Because I thought, no one, everyone's like, oh, teenagers, they're so tough, but they don't tell you why. And they don't tell you, okay, try this, this, and this to help yourself through these stages. And no, I mean, maybe there are books out there, but I sure am a researcher and a reader, and I could not find what I wanted. So I kind of created our own system. And really, it was all about connection. And so with our number 2 and number 3 son, we never allowed that gap to happen. Now, I'm not saying that they were perfect by any means. And there were still times they didn't want to talk to us, and that there were breakdowns in our relationship. But I feel like overall that we never lost that connection. There were ups and downs, which I think that's completely normal. But so I think the biggest thing that surprised me was how quickly, at whatever age it's going to happen for your teenager, 13, 14, some maybe as late as 15, they are going to change, and they are going to act like they don't want you, need you, like you. All of that is, you're going to think, oh, what in the world? And that was really difficult. And that's when I really started thinking, okay, there's got to be a better way.
I love that. I was 11, by the way, when
Oh, well, so
when
it happened earlier too, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. No teenager is the same. No teenager is the same. No parents are the same. And so it's really important that we do give young, young parents, parents of young children, that foundation that they can kind of feel and not feel judged when they make mistakes, or when or whatever. I don't believe in mistakes personally. I believe they're all opportunities for growth. But being able to navigate those conversations and those difficult times. So that's from a parenting perspective, right? I mean, you have raised 3 beautiful children.
Thank you.
You have done so, through all the ugly and all the beauty. And you've found some really important ways to connect with your children, because, and I love how you said this. You were talking about how they start to need independence and autonomy, but they still need love and connection to be heard.
Yes.
That is beautiful. And I think something to your point that a lot of parents forget. They're like, okay, you think you're grown? Go ahead then. Go be grown. Which is fine until it's not. How do you
Exactly.
how do you navigate that as an educator and as a coach?
So the type of coaching that I'm hoping to get into is I really want to help preteens and their parents to set up some of these systems so that as these changes occur, you've already made some goals together. You've already established your meeting rules. I don't know what a better word is to say, but like a system of communication where if it's a bad week, like literally, and I don't have it with me, but a spiral notebook is all you need. And we would pass it back and forth. And if I had the notebook and my son didn't know where it was, and whatever son it was, whichever at the time, I had Post-its all over the house, and they would just slap a Post-it on my mirror and I'd put it in the notebook. And so the next time we would meet, which we really, middle school, you need to start meeting weekly. And that is not an exaggeration. There is so much to cover before they leave your house. And that doesn't matter if they're going to college or just, thinking they'll go into a trade or taking a gap year. It doesn't matter what their plan is. And in middle school, they don't know what their plan is, but it's a great opportunity to start those conversations and get them thinking, what am I good at? What do I like? Who do I admire? And by starting younger, it's never too late to start, but the younger you start, the more conversations you can have. And so that's where I see myself when I finish my training for coaching. Even though you and I were talking, real life, I think I could probably start now.
Absolutely.
I think that it's never too early to start these kinds of conversations. And of course you need to cover all the other regular, like, okay, we need to talk about sex and we need to talk about, college, not college, but there are other like little things like, how are you going to make money? And let's start, do you know how to keep a budget? And, why do you need to do well in school? And I think by addressing those younger and even pre-middle school in all cases, really, if they've got a goal, they're so much more likely to stick with those hard things. And that's the other thing, as a parent and as a teacher, our kids need to fail. They need to fail and try again. They need to learn that it's okay, and what can I do better next time? Or what could I do differently? Or, how could I have approached that in a different way? And maybe it just was meant to not work. Maybe that's opening a path to a new idea or a new opportunity. So I think a lot of times as parents, really hard, and even teachers, like you want your little students, and even, I'm saying little, my middle schoolers, I still wanted them to succeed. But there were times when that was not possible.
As soon as you started talking, the first thing that came to mind, so I just got engaged. And
I know,
one of the things, thank you.
Cool.
One of the things that that is a new concept for me is the whole idea of premarital counseling. And I feel like your approach to this coaching method that you're using is like pre-teenager counseling, pre-teenager coaching, which is brilliant. It's an awkward space in some ways. I can just imagine my 12-year-old self going, Mum, I don't need to talk to you about this, and the other thing, because that's never going to happen. But realistically speaking, you're thinking, you're creating a game plan together to kind of guide your relationship, but also just their blooming adulthood, so that they know, what their goals are, what to do if and when a certain situation arises. When it comes to either the coaching, education, or the parenting space, I think one of the things that most often has come up in my circles, at least when it comes to the coaching world, there seems to be a lot of, and I'm hoping this isn't the case in your circles, there seems to be a lot of lack of wanting to approach some of those more difficult conversations. Especially like we're very quick to say that social media is having such a horrible impact on the mental health of our young people.
Mhm.
Personally, I can see both sides, but I'm a huge fan of writing, helping teenagers write music that helps to change the algorithm so that we can start feeding our young people positive messages. But that's
Right.
just me. Um, but in saying that, like, it's really hard to monitor what our young people are being faced with. Therefore, and I'm only 34 years old, so I'm relatively young when it comes to the education space. However, I have definitely seen in my 17 years of education, working in education, because I started super young, because I graduated super young, um, the impact that YouTube has had on young people's minds, the impact that sex and how easy it is to access pornography online has done to young people's minds, the impact of you know all the social media clout competition that has impacted the lives of young people. How how do you navigate those conversations with your people?
Yeah. So, I think like you, there's good and bad to everything, you know. My oldest, we luckily escaped most of this. He's going to be 26 this summer, so it was sort of starting to become a thing, but not like it has been for my youngest, who is 18.
Mm.
So the way we've sort of navigated it is we've tried to stay on the same page. So as things work, so one thing, we did not let them have a iPhone until middle school. And that
Mhm.
was when they were walking to school and it was not in the safest area. So we were like, okay, this is what you can have.
Mhm.
But with that comes responsibility. So part of that responsibility was that they, in our rule, or in our home, we had the rule that you had to turn in your phone every night.
Oh, I like that.
Um, a lot of parents don't, but if you don't, and I'm not, every family has got their own set of situations, but watch the documentary Childhood 2.0. It is a little scary. And I think a lot of parents have no idea. And I learned a lot of this as a teacher in the middle school of what was going on, of how accessible all of this was. And this was even after we had already instated this rule. So they had to turn it in. Now, were there exceptions? Of course, there were exceptions. Every rule is made to have exceptions, or
Mhm.
you know, varying degrees of I don't know. That was our rule most nights. Now, if they had a sleepover, did we take other people's phones? We didn't. We were not their parents. Did we let our kids take phones on sleepovers? It just depended on the situation.
Mhm.
So again, it's a give and take. And that's part of where, when you're a parent, you've got to, if you're in conversation with your children, um, you can talk about the whys and the wherefores and like, how is this affecting you? Um, so that was one thing, is we limited it. And then again, like when they start to be 13, 14, they're starting, or even younger, maybe you were 11, you want your time alone. You want in your room. So our rule for that was, and I mean, it sounds like we had a lot of rules, but I think we just had guidelines. Like, okay, if you want your time alone, which I get, I wanted to be alone when I was a teenager too.
I want to
But
be alone as an adult, to be fair.
yeah,
But
so the thing, the thing about that was, okay, you want to be alone. Awesome. You can be alone, but your phone means you're not alone. So the phone would stay in the kitchen
mm,
or wherever with me. Because if you really want to be alone, that doesn't include your phone. Now, we had an Echo Dot and they could have music in their room. But they could not have a computer, which just so you know, they can communicate through Google Docs. So if you've taken your kids' phones away, they can delete that and it's gone. Just saying, they're so creative and smart. They're so much smarter than we give them credit for. So, and that's the thing you have to remember is we are the adults and we are in charge, and that is for their good.
Yeah.
And so, but I know that was how they planned their outings. That is how they connected with their friends. And so as long as everything was going fine, that was really, those are the only two things that I can think of that were like rules about the phones, or their devices. And for a long time before we had laptops, there was a desktop and it was in a central room because as a teacher, I knew how some of the things that were happening and they needed to be out in the open. And I think that a lot of times parents are unaware of how easy, like you said about the porn, they're getting to porn through Snapchat and through YouTube and through all those things that they are enjoying. It's a portal to things that you may not want them to have access to. So just, be sure that you are just sort of monitoring it.
Yeah.
They knew we had access to it. I know I didn't check often, but in the very beginning, about once a week, I'd say, well, either their dad or I would say, can I see your phone?
Right.
And if they would pull back, then we're like, well, if you can't willingly hand us your phone, then what's going on?
Right.
So that wasn't really, we didn't do it all the time and not very often, but often enough that but again, there are so many backdoor ways into things that watch Childhood 2.0. It's really scary.
Yeah.
That's where I knew some of the things that I already kind of knew as a teacher were confirmed.
Right. I will watch it, but I kind of vehemently hate the fear mongering kind of media because, and maybe this is, my kind of eccentric way of working with young people. I'm a huge believer in attitude reflecting leadership. And and obviously, your kids respect you because you're a great leader. So, hats off to you. But one of the things that I distinctly remember when I was a teenager is that, yeah, you're right. We found ways around things. And if it wasn't, Google Docs or Snapchat, because Snapchat wasn't around when I was a teenager, but, there are ways to facilitate those mediums being used healthily. I'm a huge believer when I'm writing or even working with my vocal students, when I'm working with my songwriting students, especially, I will utilize Google Docs with them so that they have a way to connect with me that isn't via social media or isn't via cell phone, but they can write down their ideas, email me and tell me, hey, this is what I've got, which is awesome. But I think it's really important that, to your point, that we as educators and as mentors and coaches are up with those social media platforms so that we know how to use them, so that we know how they work, so that we know how they are potentially influencing the minds and souls and well-being of our young people. Somebody who's just vehemently against TikTok because it's TikTok and, oh my gosh, China, that doesn't do anyone any.
It's not doing anyone right. And I think, just a little just reasonableness. Like, for one thing, we never tracked our teens. I never had, I don't know even what those apps are, like Live 360 or something, because I feel like we need to trust our teens. Now, did they make mistakes and did they do things that made us question our sanity on that? Yeah, for sure. But trust is a two-way street. And were there times that we had to crack down on them? Yes, but we never tracked them, because I look back and I think, if my mom and dad, and I was a pretty good teenager, but like, I know my sisters were crazy. So I think, if my parents had tracked us, it would have been a completely different childhood. And I wanted my kids to And, if they don't make mistakes, how can they learn? And when they make a mistake, we have to be willing to forgive them. I think that's been a hard thing to watch, as so many of my both students and my kids' friends have had things happen. They've made mistakes, and kids are going to make mistakes. I mean, my gosh, I made mistake after mistake when I was a kid, but we have to be willing to let them work through that and see what they could do differently or better, or, come back from that. And I'm a big one. I have to really fight holding like a grudge. And I don't want to ever hold a grudge against my own children. So I have to be willing to like say, okay, you made a mistake. That's strike one. So let's try to never do that again, because I was a big one. Like, I want you to figure this out so that I don't have to figure out how I'm going to fix this for you. And a lot of times that was just enough to say, because it's not, I don't know. Parenting is tough. Girl, you wait. It's really hard. And I think that's the other thing. We need to really give ourselves grace. Because we're going to make mistakes. I know we made a million mistakes, and our boys have turned out okay. And they made mistakes. And I have one son in premarital counseling as well. And it's been really interesting to hear his take on that, and just that, that forgiveness is a huge thing, and we need to be willing to look past something that maybe they've done. That doesn't mean that I think it's okay, but that's where those conversations start and continue.
As you're talking about that, because you talk a lot about, or at least in the last few minutes, you've mentioned a lot about, the okayness of making mistakes and how they're going to happen, and they're going, we're going to muck up, and that's totally fine.
Right.
When you're a middle schooler, mistakes are inevitable. What I wasn't prepared for when I was a middle schooler, and when I started working with middle schoolers, which I shouldn't have been prepared for, given my own history, is not necessarily my mistakes, but the mistakes that were made that impacted my life. So whether that's somebody, I use the word mistakes very loosely, but I'm talking about everything from the impact of a divorce, the impact of an abuse, the impact of a bad grade, or about, finding out that actually you haven't been selected for a specific school or whatever it is. Forgiveness is obviously a huge component to helping that young person, work through and understand and process that healthily. But can you sort of dig a little bit deeper and take me through your approach when it comes to loving that child through that pain, through that quote unquote failure? Because I do believe that failure is really just an opportunity to grow. But how do you do that in a way, as a parent specifically, that ensures that your boys, and if you had any daughters, maybe one day in the next life, will we'll be able to continue to thrive, and in spite of, and I don't say that to mean that, any young person should view themselves as a victim, because I do not believe in that word. But how do we make sure that we support their journey in the warriordom that they are potentially going through?
Yeah. So I think a lot of people, I'm just going to put this out there. So I have boys. I don't have daughters, or I have sons. But I will tell you that boys feel things so deeply, as well as I'm sure that girls do too. And having been a teacher of everything from 3-year-olds to 14-year-olds, I've seen it all. And I think that when our kids are hurting for those various reasons that you spoke to, as well as 100 million other ways that they can be hurting, and a lot of it's in their own head, I think the best thing we can do is help them spin whatever's going on in their head, or spin the situation that they are currently, maybe it's a friendship thing. That's a huge thing from literally preschool on. Those frenemies that are so difficult to deal with. And that happens with boys too, I'm telling you.
I know. Yeah.
So I think we need to teach them from a young age, or as young as possible. And it's never too late. So that's the thing. Like, a lot of times they're like, oh, I already have a senior. Well, okay, start now. You don't have as much time. You're not going to be able to cover as much ground, but you're still the parent, and you do not have any idea how much these kids love you. They do. Even though you mess up and you yelled at them, and they know you're mad at them or whatever, they want support and love from us. So I think we have to teach them to spin whatever it is that's happening in their social life or their academic life or their mental life in a different direction. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect tomorrow or even in the next hour, but they need to start talking nicely to themselves. And you can train yourself to do this. And just like, okay, so instead of saying I'm dumb, which I got a lot in the class, I just can't do this, I'm dumb. Well, first of all, can't was a bad word in my class.
Right.
We're not going to say can't. Let's think, I can't do it yet. Yet is a huge word. And so as they're struggling, and they're gonna struggle, I'm struggling, I'm almost 60, and I'm like, okay, how is this happening to me? We have to remember that they don't have the background knowledge, and they don't have the maturity. So we have to help them cross that bridge and just say, what could you do tomorrow that would be a better way to deal with that? Or what are questions that you could ask yourself that would help you think of something more positive? Just if they can get in their heads new ways of attacking a problem or of thinking about a situation, that is the first step. That's a huge first step, because thoughts
dictate everything.
They do. And I think I have figured that out even more. I think that was huge to me when I did go in and teach middle school, because I knew it. It had been a few years since I'd been in the classroom full time. And these kids were I went in 2019, and I taught through COVID and then the next year. And we got our 2 kids out of college, our 2 older boys. And then I'm like, I mean, middle school's a rough gig. And any middle school teacher out there, thank you for what you're doing. Salute, 100%.
Yeah.
But those kids wanted their parents to love them. That's all they wanted. And it didn't matter what their parents did for a living. It didn't matter how much money they had. It didn't matter. None of it mattered. And there were some really broken kids out there. So I think if you are talking to your kids, if you're listening to your kids, and I think listening is way underrated. Just listening to our kids.
2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yes. I love that saying, because I don't know. I think if we give them the opportunity to share what's going on, a lot of times they just need to get it out.
Yeah. I love that you bring up the cognitive reframe type stuff. I'm so big on giving young people some tools when it comes to being able to learn how to work through and reprogram how they're looking at things. One of the exercises I specifically love working on with my clients and my students is looking at their emotion as if it were a person. What would you say? Yeah, right. What would you say to your depression if your depression was sitting on the seat right across from you and you were about to go into an arm wrestle? What would what would you say? What would you say to your broken heart or your sadness or even your happiness? What would be the communication that you would want to what would be the messages you would want to communicate with those emotions, just as a way to kind of get out of that mindset and start to sort of regain control over recognizing that they are not their feelings.
Oh, yeah. Right? I love that. Yeah. I think when we talked, I had talked to you about the 7 C's of of parenting. And I think when my 7 C's are, I'm going to say them real quick. That's okay.
Of course.
Control what you can, connect with friends, chart your progress. Who doesn't love a journal? Chip in around the house. It helps to help. It really does. Choose happy, and it is a choice. Chat with a live human. I think a lot of times they get into their phone and they just can't see anywhere else. And then check in with someone, check in with an adult, check in with a counselor, a teacher, hopefully it's a parent, but if it's not a parent, find someone. And, I think if we can share some of these ways with our teens too, like when you can control what you can, okay, just know that how someone else is thinking or feeling about you, that's out of your control. So go find someone else that wants to be with you or that you enjoy being with. Maybe it's not your first choice. Maybe you really want to be with that girl across the room, but maybe she's been a horrible person the last few days. So who needs that?
Yeah.
So we need to, they need to learn to take care of themselves. We're big about self-care and midlife. That's one of my, things with my new blog, but it starts young. Like they need to put themselves, higher up in the priority of, I'm a good person. I deserve to be with people that love me and like me and think I'm funny and smart and
treat yourself like your own best friend.
Hard.
Yep. No, I love that. I love this so much. I'm very excited about all of the work that you're doing, Mel. I'm super excited about your new joint venture. You've started parentinghighschoolers.com. Sorry, on Facebook, Parenting High Schoolers on Instagram.
Nope.
This is wrong.
That's where
you're right. Next Phase Parenting. My apologies.
It's okay. It's confusing.
Pre-planning is confusing, but this is it. Like just like from middle school to high school to adulthood, every life is, it's all about living in the next phase and trying to figure out what that next phase is. My cat loves getting involved in the very last part of these podcasts. Okay, so you've joined up with one of your buddies, who is also another coach, to create Next Phase Parenting. So you're found on all social media, on Next Phase Parenting on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, which I'm super fascinated about, Facebook, and of course, nextphaseparenting.com. You are an author. You have a book that came out a few years back now.
Yeah, it came out in 2019. There it is.
There we go. College Bound, the ultimate list of conversations to help your teen through high school. I love that so much.
Yeah. And it's not just, it says college bound, but that was like a good search term. And I'm self-published. I was trying to think, how will people find my book? But it's really for any parent that has the intention of your child leaving your home eventually, which don't we all? I mean, it's a sad day when they leave, but it's a happy day. And let's help them. These are conversations that will help them be successful wherever they end up.
Of course. I love that. If you are watching and you want to keep in touch with Mel, please check out everything that she's doing at nextphaseparenting.com, or of course, Next Phase Parenting on all social media. Did you have anything else that you wanted to gift our wonderful listeners with before we take off?
I do have this printable. I can't remember if I gave you that link, but I could sure link it in. I can link it in. I'll figure out how to get it on our chat on your Facebook page.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So where can people go for that?
I will have to talk to my partner about where we can have a little landing page for it. So
fantastic.
I'll put it in your Facebook group by tomorrow. Will that work?
So for the 7 C's, we watch the space, friends. We will be able to get that to you as soon as possible.
Yes.
Until next time, friends, thank you so much, Mel, for your time. Really appreciate your insight, your expertise, and your unconditional love for your students, your kids, and just everybody that you work with. It's wonderful. I'm such a believer in, we are all living proof that love wins, because love truly does win. So I love that. Thank you so much again to everybody who has taken the time to listen to or watch this podcast. Thank you to my Patreon supporters for helping make this podcast be an actual thing. Thank you, of course, to the iRant Network, who are the wonderful humans, his name is Mr. M, behind the production of this podcast. And of course, if you want to look back on previous episodes, you can check those all out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iTunes, YouTube, or anywhere else that you get good podcasting material. See you next week, friends. Be good, be kind, and I will see you on the next episode. Peace.
That was awesome. I was so excited to meet you finally.
Yay. That's very cool.
Breaking in my headspace, I'm trying to get my feelings straight. I've overthought my mistakes, I turn water to wine, so hard to stay sober. I'm damaged and I'm love stoned, so hard to remain in control. Rewriting what I thought I know, and I'm drinking it in, but the lesson ain't over. And I can almost pinpoint where we went wrong. I'm not about the sad songs, the foundation said I'm good to go. No matter what comes my way, I'll be smiling every step I take. I'm a legend, make no mistake, that I'm living proof that love wins. No matter what the future holds, I'm here and I'm not letting go. I'm a legend, baby, you should know that I'm living proof that love wins. Living proof that love wins. Who I used to be, but I'm not going down quietly. I know I create my destiny. When it's bright as light, the evergreen knows it. I left behind the what if. I broke up with the negative. I'm flirting with abundance, and I'm drinking it in. My purpose is magic. And I can almost pinpoint where my love began. I'm so glad that I know who I am, 'cause I'm the woman, I'm not the man. Whoa. No matter what comes my way, I'll be laughing every step I take. I'm a legend, make no mistake, I'm living proof that love wins. No matter what the future holds, I'll be here and I'm not letting go. I'm a legend, baby, you should know, I'm living proof that love wins. I'm living proof that love wins. Living proof that love wins. I'm living proof that love wins.